Who are the banksters? What's the bank cartel up to? In a moment, we will check in with, of course, the guerrilla economist. We call him V on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast to Coast. I'm George Norrie. V, the guerrilla economist, has worked for some time at the top commodity trading firms and investment banks. He has contributed to private think tanks that help create investment policy. His track record is uncanny, very documented. He's appeared with Steve Quayle, Doug Hagman, both our special guests here on Coast to Coast AM. V has predicted with incredible accuracy the play-by-play of the Eurozone crisis. He was one of the first to warn about Japan's disastrous economic policies. And here he is on Coast to Coast. V, how are you, sir?
George, it is a pleasure to be on with you tonight and all the people out there listening on Coast to Coast. I am doing fantastic.
I'm looking forward to this. Now, why do we call you V?
Well, it's it's my nom de plume. V is a shortened. It's a letter symbolizing both my first and my last name. And being that I have a very unique name and to want to remain somewhat anonymous as I operate in these murky waters, so to speak, hence I became V.
Super.
And it just so happens to be it's a popular character that's been created by Alan Moore, which later on became a movie that the Wachowski brothers created, V for Vendetta.
You got it. And for a moment I thought maybe you were after the cartel, but I guess in a simple way you are, aren't you?
Yes, I am after the cartel, correct.
Now, when you're hiding under this V, is it because of safety concerns or professional concerns?
Both.
Okay.
Case in point, I had a cohort a few years ago that opened his mouth about the J.P. Morgan metal scandal, and that occurred in London. And suffice it to say, he was T-boned at an intersection while he was in his Ferrari with his wife.
Oh.
So, in this world...
That happens. It does happen.
Exactly.
I mean, I still have my doubts about Michael Hastings, the reporter.
Exactly.
Whose Mercedes simply blew up and caught on fire. So.
Well, that's the nature of what things are turning into, George, is that freedom of the press is something that's being choked out of in many parts of the world today, and it's sad to say and breaks my heart that in America, that's exactly what's happening. And the fact that they're blowing up journalists in broad daylight, that even that's not enough to wake up the American populace is absolutely bewildering to me.
Just so everyone knows, too, I have no idea who V is in terms of his real identity at all. He's been with Steve Quayle and Doug Hagman, two people I respect, and that's good enough for me. But we don't know each other, V. Correct?
No, we don't.
Okay.
Correct.
It's almost like, what's my line? Who is sign in, please? What is really going on this planet? Because people are just baffled over what's happening all over the place.
Correct.
What's happening, in your opinion?
Well, you have what's called the story that's been plastered on the news, that's been plastered on television to make everybody think that, this is what reality is all about. And then you have the actual truth. And the truth is something that's put behind multiple layers of multiple compartmentalized theories, hypotheses, stories, opinions, critiques, all sorts of things to throw the person off. The reality is, George, is that humanity has been, and I'm talking about free humanity, has been in a millennial struggle against a creature, a subhuman creature recently called the banksters. And I believe that term was coined by Gerald Celente.
Mm-hmm. Sure was.
Doesn't live too far from me, by the way.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. The previous name of these banksters were known as international bankers at one point, and prior to that, they were known as the money changers. Okay? So for thousands of years, we've struggled against it. For some reason, there's always been a group people that have separated themselves from the population at large, and they've always sought covert means to control the population. And their biggest mechanism of control has always been the private control of currency and the issuance thereof. So most of the suffering we see today, George, in the world is basically suffering that's created by this banking cartels that have existed for a very, very, very long time.
Why do they do this, V? I mean, they've got more money than God.
Yeah.
They can do anything they want. Are they bored? Is this like a game for them?
That's a great question. From my personal experience from being around some of these guys, they are bored. It is a bit of a game to them.
It is.
It's not about money because they have more. Look, they print the money for the love of God.
Right. They have it.
It is about power.
They've got their money.
It's always about control.
Yep. They've got their boats. They can do what they want to do. This is power. They love to see people manipulated.
Yes. It is a game they play amongst themselves. It is a game that they play amongst each other. They, in fact, compete. There are various arms of this cartel, and they compete against each other, almost like points. You see, at the lowest level in Wall Street, you have a stockbroker, okay? And that stockbroker, if he's good, is someone who is very ruthless, number one. Number two is someone who is doesn't care about anything or anyone. And the money is simply something that is just like points in a video game. It means nothing to him. In fact, most stockbrokers, they go broke very shortly after leaving Wall Street because this game fuels their very lavish and fast lifestyle. Okay? So that's at the lowest level. And as you begin to climb the rungs of the ladder, you see that from this thrill-seeking, young, amateurish, sophomoric mentality, they start evolving. Those who survive the initial stages of wanton excess and voluminous amounts of cocaine, when they survive that and they cut through that, they get to a level where they just become absolutely non-human. And what I mean by that is any semblance of conscience is gone. There is no patriotism, there's no country, there's no language, there's no border. All it is at that point is pure profit, power, and control. And that's what it boils down to.
If you met them in a meeting or at a social setting, and I mean you being collectively all of us, would we like these people or not?
No. They are social misfits. These men are social lepers. They are very arrogant. They are very haughty. They believe that these men are delusional. They believe that they are masters of the universe. And the reality is, George, is that these men could not fight their way out of a paper bag. And they think...
They didn't have the money.
Exactly. So to them, it's the game. It's the aura that they carry themselves with, this benevolence that they feel that they have, that they're somehow separate, they're somehow special from the rest of mass humanity. Thus, they deserve the right to shape the future of humanity. They deserve to, how they would say, control or coerce the future evolution of human society.
V, how did they get their wealth? Were they born into privilege? Is that how they did it?
Some of them were born into privilege. See, what happened, George, for over 1,000 years, okay, there's always been groups that have tried through various means to get a hold of the money supply, of civilization. Okay, now
they seem to have done that.
They seem to have done that. Now the thing is, they are now at a level where they're much more networked than before. prior to, I'd say, the 19th and 20th century, they were not as networked as they are now. So they've achieved much of what they set out to do. They have a fully integrated world. They have a world that's fully connected, and they have their strings into everything. They have their hands into every facet of much of the countries of this world in terms of their banking and industry and manufacturing and finance, which also controls the political spectrum of many of the nations. So they have it. The final missing ingredient in this whole thing is having a crisis to completely bring the world to its knees in order to integrate it into the one last financial system and total control that they've been seeking for a long time.
The wealth and power that they have secured, and they quest, to do more and more of this. How many families are we talking about?
Well, you're looking at originally about 15 to 17 families, okay? Over the years, some of them have lost wealth, some of them have gained wealth, some of them have come, some of them have gone.
And this would not be the new money people. It's not or is it? The Bill Gates who hit a home run with Microsoft, Zuckerberg with Facebook, these billionaires. Are they those people, or is this even beyond them?
It's beyond them, George. I mean, look, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, these guys, they're allowed to get to a position because they're allowed to, okay, in order so they can be an agent, okay, an agent that will create the policies, the changes that the banksters would like to see enacted. So it's beyond them. Okay, so when we see the paper wealth put out there by guys like Bill Gates, he's worth, $53 billion. Zuckerberg's worth about $4 billion. Carlos Slim, $70 billion. These are just like numbers that are irrelevant. These banking cartels and the royalties that seem to congregate or move in conjunction with these guys, they're in the trillions. I believe a Russian economist has actually valued, and we all know the infamous Rothschild family, has actually valued them over the course of hundreds of years at around $400 trillion.
Wow. See, the average person, just wants to be left alone.
Correct.
All they want is a nice place for them and their families, maybe a car or two, a comfortable job. They want to be able to go to sporting events. They just want to have a nice existence and be left alone. But these people can't seem to leave them alone, can they? They're always bugging people.
Yes, absolutely. And that's the last jewel on this crown that's stopping their whole thing, that's really slowing things down for them, is the United States.
How so?
The saving grace of this country was the Founding Fathers. The saving grace is that these men were intelligent enough that they drafted a constitution that not only ensured us a freedom of speech, but has also ensured us the right to bear arms, which they are totally freaked out about.
And they're misinterpreting what it means.
Exactly. And I promise you it has nothing to do with sports hunting or anything like that.
No.
And the Founding Fathers have set up a system to limit the controls of government. Now, over the course of 30, 40 years, they have accelerated their erosion. They have accelerated the evisceration of the Constitution of this country.
Precisely.
And it's only recently, George, that they've brought this country to a level where the executive has so much power. And that's only done through their manipulation. Never before has a president come out and say, hey, I'm the commander-in-chief. I can do whatever I want. You're not the commander-in-chief.
Yeah, I have this executive order. I'm just doing it.
Exactly. You see, the Founding Fathers always intended that the president gets the declaration of war from Congress, And once he gets that declaration of war, then he becomes commander-in-chief.
That's right.
And now it's all upside down. So this is the world they've created. They've done this through mass conditioning. And so, they need that crisis. They've been working hard on trying to get America subjugated, and they've succeeded for the most part.
Yeah, I would say they're doing a pretty good job bringing us down to our knees, aren't they?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But I think in the long run, V, that person that I just mentioned who just wants to be left alone, I think they're going to fight back. And I don't necessarily mean physically, but I think they're going to say enough is enough. They're close to that. They're not there yet. But I think that's going to happen.
George, the reality of the situation is this. Never before has there been such a resistance to the banksters. Never before has there been such an awakening as to what this creature that was born on Jekyll Island called the Federal Reserve, what it really is.
Yeah.
Never before has there been such a light shown on such cockroaches that is causing them to scurry. Okay? Now for the first time, because of this invention that Al Gore created called the Internet, and I joke about that.
Yeah, that's right. Great invention, Al.
Yeah. Because of the Internet, they've overestimated so many things. Number one, their biggest mistake is they've underestimated the human spirit. They've underestimated the vast majority of Americans. They've underestimated the fact that there is free information out there. And, George, the biggest underestimation they've ever done is they've underestimated the power of the alternative media. Yes. And it's because of shows like Coast to Coast and Steve Quayle and Doug and Alex Jones and so many others that are part of what's being called the alternative media, which I'm starting to call the new media. We were able to put a stop and slow things down considerably, okay? Now, let me tell you something. One of the things that I was trying to highlight and the things that were showed to me going into, August, was that there was definitely supposed to be a taper from the Federal Reserve in September. It was supposed to happen, George, and that would have been the contraction that brought the economy to its knees.
Right.
And it was supposed to coincide with a false flag.
Right.
Okay? And that false flag was in Syria. They gravely miscalculated. You see, the biggest problem the banksters have is, number one, they're still human. They make mistakes. They're not perfect. Okay? And number two, the second biggest problem the banksters have is they got to deal with people. And guess what? People are imperfect. Some are just downright idiots. Okay? And that's the case what we happened in Syria. The scenario that was supposed to play out was the false flag in Syria was supposed to work, supposed to have the mass amount of casualties. It was supposed to be blamed with an airtight case against Assad, which would have brought us to the quote-unquote red line.
Who, by the way, is no Boy Scout.
Absolutely. But he is a saint. He is a choir boy compared to Al-Qaeda.
No question.
Yeah.
No question. The mistake he made was when there was the civil unrest, the way he went after them, he should have tempered that. I think he probably could have worked things out. But I suspect that the play was already afoot to get these rebels to do what they were doing.
Absolutely. Al-Qaeda is the perfect proxy army of the banksters. Okay? And I'm going to tie in a few things, especially with the Middle East and how critical it is.
All right. Well, hold on for a second, V. We're going to take this break and come back and talk more with you. V, of course, is with us. His website, roguemoney.net, which is linked up for you at coasttocoastam.com. Later on, we'll take some phone calls in the split show right here. V, our special guest. I don't know who he is. I don't know his name. I just know him as V. Back in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. Have you had a chance yet to watch our television program, Beyond Belief? And it's on demand right now. That means you can watch it anytime you want. Simple as that. Watch it on the internet. Watch it on television. You can get those little devices now that allow you to watch internet programs right on your big flat screen. So you can do all that. How do you do it? Well, it's 10 days free to look at it. Simply go to this website, beyondbelief.com, www.beyondbelief.com. Welcome back. V's with us, the guerrilla economist. I like that, by the way. Why do they call you the guerrilla economist?
Well, it's a name that I guess was bestowed upon me in the sense that, you look at historically what the terminology guerrilla is. It's a freedom fighter, so to speak, someone who's against the system. And if you listen to what I say, it's basically complete antithesis of what many of the mainstream economists or those who dabble in the markets would say. So it's basically, getting rid of all the fluff and giving you the raw truth. And because of my run-and-gun style, the moniker guerrilla economist just began to fit.
The Federal Reserve, that some people are now beginning to realize just is not part of the federal government.
Right.
They continue to print money, fiat-based money. Nothing's backing it. They just keep printing and printing and printing. How do they do this? I mean, how are they allowed to do this where other countries, rogue nations, they can't do it because they have no banking system to do it?
Right.
How do they just simply print money?
Simple.
Nobody stops them.
Right. Well, when this monster was given life in 1913, okay? Now, prior to that, there's been a couple of politicians who have fought valiantly against the Fed, and one of them was Louis T. McFadden. Now, we all are familiar. Those who don't know, McFadden fought. He was a senator. He fought the Fed tooth and nail, preventing it from being enacted. And when the Fed came to power, and Christmas Eve, majority of Congress was out on Christmas vacation, and I think it was about 6 people that voted to get this thing set up. Nelson Aldrich from New York being one of them, and then it was written into law by Woodrow Wilson. McFadden said something that was so profound. He said, the American public had no idea that a banking cartel, that a group of bankers and industrials have taken over America, that the Fed has not only taken over America, but they have usurped, his words, usurped the government, okay? That is why, till this day, there is no audit of the Federal Reserve. That is why, till this day, they work with the same modus operandi as the Bank of England, and that is the quote-unquote investors, which are the private banks, in the Federal Reserve System are still unknown. That is why when I believe it was the former person who ran Meet the Press, I just can't remember that gentleman's name, who died.
Tim Russert.
Tim Russert. There you go. I was going to say Tim Robbins.
He's still kicking.
Yeah, he's still kicking. But when Russert was interviewing Greenspan, the question that he asked Greenspan was this. He said, what is the relationship between a Federal Reserve chairman and the President of the United States? And Greenspan looked at Russert dead in the eye and said, there is no relationship. We don't care who the president is and what laws they enact. Think about that.
Yeah. Because nothing can stop them.
Correct. But, okay, this is the image they want. Like I told you, they have been drunk on their own hubris. And the image that they like to portray is that they're invincible. But they've always underestimated one thing, George. That one thing they underestimate is this. Even though they give us this worthless piece of paper printed out of thin air called the dollar, fiat currency, okay, they underestimate that free markets and free individuals dictate what currency is.
That's true.
Not central banks, not governments. Why do you think they are panicking about gold and silver? Why do you think they artificially suppress it? It is like kryptonite to these banksters.
Mm-hmm.
It's like garlic.
It should be $3,000 an ounce.
Exact. George, my estimates, okay, right now if you just take some of the suppression off, you adjust it for inflation, gold should be around $5,000 to $6,000 an ounce.
Wow.
Silver should be, right now, conservatively speaking, $450 to $500 per ounce.
Yeah, and where's silver now? High 20s?
Low 20s.
Low 20s.
It went to high 20s a little bit. Then he had another round of suppression coming in because, look, people ask me all the time, well, V, why are they doing this? Why do they want to suppress precious metals? Well, the answer is simple. If you are a central banker, okay, if you want any sort of monetary credibility, you cannot have high gold and silver prices. You just can't have it.
No.
Especially if your currency just so happens to be the world reserve currency.
Then that's probably what did Saddam Hussein in when he wanted to switch and get away from the dollar for his oil.
Correct. And let me tell you guys something. The folks need to understand this. We don't go to war for the quote-unquote cause of democracy. Okay? And I'm sure the coast-to-coast listeners know that. But anybody who's new to listening in, and this is a complete shock to your system, the truth is we don't go to war for democracy and spreading freedom. These are all catchphrases. These are all axioms that we like to make the public feel good when we have to go out there and commit some atrocities for corporate and banking interests. Look at what's going on in the Middle East. Look at what's going on in North Africa. It is the war for the survival of the petrodollar. That's what's really going on.
And it's been going on for a long, long time.
Correct.
I mean, the CIA threw out Mossadegh in Iran a long time ago because he wasn't playing game with the British Petroleum.
Correct. And who was the CIA sections chief that took control of that whole operation, Operation Ajax? Good old Kermit Roosevelt.
Is that the first?
And what did Kermit do? Well, we machine gun school buses, we blew up apartment buildings, blamed it on Mossadegh, right?
That's right.
All sorts of...
They got him out and got the Shah in.
Yep.
See, I think these people are concerned about two things.
Yeah.
The guns we carry and the population. And I would guess that they would like to try to do away with both.
You're absolutely correct. Now, the thing is, George, okay, they've backfired. And like I said, they make mistakes. They're not perfect. Okay, some people might have this image of these benevolent group of men, and we're powerless against them. The reality is this. They make mistakes, okay? Every single event that has occurred that it appears to be a quote-unquote Manchurian individual committing atrocities in gun-free zones has backfired. Americans are buying more guns, okay?
Yeah, they are.
That freaks out the banksters. They're like, wait a minute. They're buying guns at a record pace, okay? Every time, they try to do something, it's been backfiring. Before we went to break, I mentioned about Syria, okay? Because they gave this chemical weapons to a group of morons, okay? But the funny thing with these young punks running around holding the Al-Qaeda banner is that these guys tend to videotape themselves in everything that they do. And
put it on YouTube and Facebook.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the banksters overestimated. They have a bunch of young guys with room temperature IQs running their operations, and it's backfired severely on them. Because of that backfire, the whole taper thing was thrown out the window. They couldn't get their taper. Okay? Now they're saying, okay, we're just going to keep printing. Check back with us in October. Coincidentally, what I've been told from my sources is that there will be no Syria strike in September. And I said this on Doug's show, within a few days of this happening. Okay, and sure enough, there's nothing going on in September in Syria.
Well, I said the day these very unfortunate people were gassed,
yes,
that it probably wasn't Assad. He can't be that stupid.
No, why would he gas his own people when he's winning?
And he knows that would have got him out. Exactly.
So and then you have the Russians, who have absolutely checkmated the U.S. in the Middle East.
Yeah, they did.
Completely taken any military option off. And the reason for that is this, folks. Look, you got to understand what's going on in the Middle East. It is about the natural gas, okay? That's what it's all about. On my site, roguemoney.net, there's an article called Why Syria. It's also on Steve Quayle's site, detailing very clearly what's really going on, why the Qataris and the Saudis are funding al-Qaeda through these proxy wars to overthrow Assad. Now, coincidentally, look at the three cities in Syria where the most conflict is occurring: Aleppo, Homs, and Damascus. Coincidentally, those are the three cities in which this natural gas pipeline is supposed to run. Okay? Look at what happened in Libya, in Tunisia, what's happening in Egypt. A pipeline is supposed to run through there, just like what's happening with Afghanistan. All right? Look at every military base in Afghanistan. It happens to be where this proposed Caspian pipeline is supposed to run through. That's what this whole thing is about. The problem in Syria is that Syria has a very close relationship with Russia. Now, who does it happen supplies all the natural gas to the Europeans?
There you go.
The Russians.
Yep.
Okay? That's why Vladimir Putin cannot allow Syria to collapse. Because if Syria collapses, 25% of the Russian GDP goes bye-bye. Okay? And he cannot let that happen. So, the deal that's been struck on the back end between Qatari Petroleum International, Qatari International Petroleum, and ExxonMobil, all right, is to get the liquid natural gas and the natural gas over into the hot European markets. You see, Syria just happens to be in the way. It is number one. And number two, it's about taking out Russia. And number three, it's about the prize of Europe.
And it's all laid out. It's right there. It's in black and white.
Clear as day for anybody who takes the time to look.
What is going on with the future? I want you to look into your crystal ball, V. What's going to happen in the next year or two?
Okay. If the thing that has come down because of what has occurred with this Syria false flag, look, it's so important. That is a pivotal moment with what the banksters wanted to do. As I said before, if the banksters got the kind of response they were looking for with the Syria false flag, that would have triggered a massive regional war, which would have instantly collapsed our economy. It would have been bedlam and mayhem, and we would have been a locked-down society with things really spiraling out of control. Okay, now, okay, the other faction of the banksters are really putting their weight into pulling things back, saying, let's just kill America economically. Let's just give them the slow bleed. And the slow bleed is we're looking at a total, complete collapse in about a year or two. Okay?
You predict this, or you think this could happen?
I'm thinking very strongly, and I'm predicting just from my data itself. I'm really predicting if they do this. Now, this is barring, and I'm going to make this very clear, this is barring some unforeseen, quote-unquote, black swan, like my colleague Nicholas Taleb says, okay? This is barring some sort of a black swan event, okay? Barring an event like that, the slow bleed would bring us to a collapse at least in about a year to 2 years at the most, okay? At that point, we're going to be completely into a wonderful environment, never before really seen before, and that's stagflation, where you have ridiculous amounts of high unemployment. You have incredible amounts of zero growth GDP and hyperinflation of your currency all at the same time. So it's the worst of both worlds.
Yep, it really is. Well, we'll have to see some of this and see how it unfolds. What will be the telltale signs so we know it's leading and creeping in that direction?
Well, the telltale signs we've heard with the FOMC is that the Fed has decided that they're going to go ahead and continue to stimulate.
$85 billion a month, right?
$85 billion a month continued, number one. Number two, okay, we're going to see a massive collapse in the housing markets. Now, folks, back in May, all right, the Fed tried to get the housing market stimulated, and housing prices rose about 6%. Okay, that is simply because you had investment firms that went out and began to purchase homes 10,000 here, 20,000 here, 30,000 over there, in the hopes that these foreclosed homes will be sold off the market, number one, or these, at that time, very hot idea of rent to own. Okay, now we're hearing news that all these firms that have done this, now they're dumping properties. Okay, now people ask me all the time, because I've worked on the back end of this with the whole robo-signing when we purposely shut off the flow of these foreclosed homes into the market. People ask me, well, V, how many houses are there in shadow inventory? It's 34 million plus. That's how many houses are out there in shadow inventory, most of which are foreclosed on, many of which are uninhabited, many of which are just in a very bad predicament. Okay, now people will say, well, how long would it take for us to fill those homes? Well, I like to use the example on a micro level with Ireland. And Ireland's a country that has about 300,000 homes that are vacant. Okay, if current population and economic growth levels in Ireland, it will take them 40 years to fill those homes. With us in the United States, take into account our population growth, our economic statistics right now, that would take us 300 years to get close to filling those homes.
Oh, look at Detroit.
Detroit, George, is the very petri dish of what happens when you have bad economic policies and bad spending and out-of-control policies, and you see that in Detroit. And Detroit is a type and shadow of where the rest of this country is going unless we wake up and put a stop to this nonsense.
How do you do that? How do you stop it? How does the individual stop it?
Here's how the individual stops it. You stop it first. We've all heard the adage, local and state governments first. Well, here's the thing, folks. I think we've seen a perfect example of this about 2 weeks ago in Colorado when they recalled two senators who were
against guns, right?
Exactly. Okay? That's what we have to do. We got to have an amendment to the Constitution that Jefferson always wanted, which was having a term limit on senators. Okay? And number two, what we need to do is begin to get proactive on finding who are these cronies, because the Republicrats and the Democrats are the two of the same wings, all right, on the same dragon, all right? So we need to understand, and people need to have a discernment that figuring out who are the politicians that's pro-American and those who are not, okay? Psychopaths who've been around for way past their prime, psychopaths like John McCain and Lindsey Graham. These are guys who not only need to be put out to the glue factory, they need to be recalled yesterday, okay? So the American people have to get proactive in that. And once we start getting aggressive and we start kicking back against the banksters, that's when they lose. And we got to demand that the Congress gets reinstated with the command, the issuance, and the flow of currency and credit.
Let's hope so. V, we're going to take some phone calls with you when we come right back on Coast to Coast AM. His website, roguemoney.net. You do not do the www, just type in roguemoney.net, and we've got it linked up for you. Okay, this hour we'll take your phone calls with V, the guerrilla economist, and I'll chat with him, too, when we come right back on Coast to Coast AM. Okay, welcome back with V and your calls. V, you have said that we are the collateral for the bankers' debts. Explain that.
Sure. When the Fed came to power in 1913, okay, it has been through a system of incrementalism. Every single event, staged and orchestrated, has allowed them to grab more and more power, okay?
Yep.
The biggest event that they needed was a depression. And they got that depression in the 29 stock market collapse and the 33 collapse as well, okay? That point, they have collapsed the currency, contracted it so bad that they basically made the federal government beg for mercy. At that point, okay, the U.S. government, for all intents and purposes, was bankrupt. And you could actually Google this. I've actually written articles on this as well. That bankruptcy allowed the total and complete takeover of every facet and every departmental office of the United States. And one of the ways that the U.S. government stays functioning is to always be in a perpetual war mentality, all right? And that is why for most people listening to my voice, and even you, George, okay, this country has been at war for as long as you have been alive, okay? And that's one of the modalities that's used by the banksters, right? We've seen it throughout the history of Britain, all right, where when the Brits were at the height of their power in the 1700s, they have fought 4 massive bloody wars and an outright bankruptcy in order to get to that level. And then they petered down and collapsed. We're at the same juncture, okay? So every aspect of America right now is that of a captured operation. That's why we have been put up, the citizenry, as collateral. We've been pledged as collateral. Okay, that's why we have the Social Security Act. That's why some people don't even know that. Actually, most people don't know that the number on the back of your Social Security card that starts with a letter, the alphanumeric, is actually a bond number. Okay, and you take that number, you actually go into any exchange, that's your information pops up. You're the collateral, all right? And we are the collateral that the U.S. uses to float its bonds. So that's the whole thing behind the bankruptcy of the United States.
Of all the things you've looked at, V, which one shocks you still the most?
The thing that shocks me the most, George, is the fact that most Americans understand football scores better than they understand the very monetary policies that dictate what they carry in their wallet. Most Americans could give you verbatim. I mean, case in point, all right? The biggest news story today in New York was not the markets, was not the Kenya mall shootings. The biggest thing in the news today in New York was the fact that 18,000 people stood online in Yankee Stadium waiting for a Mariano Rivera bobblehead doll. That's what blows my mind away, George, because they have totally and completely got us bought and sold into this bread and circus imaginary world that all of us are living in. And that's what kills me.
Amazing. Let's take some calls here for you. We'll go to Dave in Sherman Oaks, California, west of the Rockies. David, how are you?
Yeah, I'm great, George. Thank you for another great show. And Mr. V, I'd just like to ask you this. You did mention John McCain, Lindsey Graham, etc. I was just wondering to what extent you feel prior presidents, such as Woodrow Wilson on down to the 2 Bushes, were specifically involved in creating this environment at the behest of the bankers or as literally part of the blue blood families involved therein.
It's a great question. I think every single president that has come into power since Wilson has been at some form or in some way controlled and manipulated by international shadow banking agendas, okay? Every single president that has tried to get away from that has either been thrown out of office, a la Nixon, or B, completely killed. Kennedy, Garfield, Lincoln, okay? So that's the extent. And also with Reagan. Okay, here's an interesting story with Reagan, okay? We all know his assassination attempt. Prior to that assassination attempt by Hinckley, he was very vocal, very ardent. The man kind of spoke his mind. And after that event, he kind of quieted down. I know that some people have noticed that. It turns out, I know a very good friend of mine who's a scientist knows the doctor that worked on Reagan that very fateful day. And that whole event was very suspect to begin with, okay, especially the fact that Secret Service supposedly got lost for 18 minutes trying to find a hospital in New York City. It's absolutely ridiculous. So, yeah, to answer your question, yeah, there is no president. A president is just a puppet, a figurehead no matter who the president is, the agenda never changes. The monetary policy never touches. The Holy Grail, it's never touched. And the foreign policy, which reflects not the military-industrial complex, because the military-industrial complex it does the bidding of the multinational bankers.
Well, they do the bidding, and they do the bidding quite well, don't they?
Yep, absolutely.
Next up, we go to Mark in Ocala, Florida, on the wildcard line. Mark, thank you. Welcome to the program.
Oh, thanks for taking my call, George, and thank you for coming on, V. I want to make three real quick points. That without the lawyers, the corrupt lawyers and judges, the cities like Detroit could become so corrupt, and Washington, D.C. could not become so corrupt. And McCain and Graham, they're narcissistic, psychopathic, commune Nazi, Marxist pragmatists is what they all are, it seems to me. And another question was, how do they manipulate the silver so far away from gold? It's unbelievable because it should be 10-1. And you mentioned the housing with 34 million. Well, how is it that they are able to maintain such a high price on a home that should not have so much value to it?
Great question. The thing with silver is this, and I'm going to give you a quick little synopsis here. With J.P. Morgan, when they started their SLV ETF, okay, they put about 34 million ounces of physical silver into their vault. They put out contracts for 750 million ounces in the hopes that all those contracts will not be coming in one day asking for their silver, causing a collapse of the run on the vault. All right? So all the crashing of silver that you see globally and worldwide is them just selling off and dumping future contracts and buying it up on the market itself. The paper market has no bearing on the physical market, no bearing whatsoever. I have contacts in the UK who are telling me that, hey, V, it's taking me 2 weeks on waiting lists to get gold, to get silver. I have contacts in Hong Kong telling me the same thing, in the Philippines and in India. All over the world there is a shortage. There is a shortage of precious metals because people, the world, sense the impending doom and collapse of the dollar, and they are buying gold and silver at a ravenous clip. Okay? So all the manipulations, the way the banksters do it, is all in the paper market. And we're getting into a point of history. And like I said before, central banks and governments do not dictate what real money is. The free market and individuals do. And we're getting to the point in history where we're going to see a divorce from the papers market and the physical market. It's going to be two completely different things. Okay? Now, the second thing about housing. The way they're able to do it is this. Back in 2007, all right, the bank that I work for owned a U.S. subsidiary. And what we've done is this. We had a mortgage department. Let's say about 2,300 individuals. They fired and laid off the vast majority of it, and we whittled down that department down to only 120 individuals.
Oh, jeez.
So we purposely bottlenecked the whole process, because if we let that faucet open, it would have created a housing crash the world has never seen before. So we purposely siphoned off a vast majority of inventory from ever reaching into the market, and then we slowly trickled it in, okay? And that's how we're able to control the artificial rising of the prices of homes, which is a total bubble. Folks, let me tell you something. You don't have an economy in this country. I'm going to repeat that again. You do not have an economy. And what I mean by that is this. When you have a central bank that's the primary driver of your stock market, you don't have an economy. When you have a central bank that's the primary buyer of your treasuries, you don't have an economy. When you have a central bank that's the primary sustainer of your real estate market, you don't have an economy. When you have a central bank, if the chairman passes gas in the wrong direction, the market dives 200-300 points. Folks, you don't have an economy. What you have is a house of cards. What you have is a really bad Ponzi scheme.
But it seems to work for them, V.
Oh, it works great for them, so long as the sheeple go along with it.
And they have been.
For the most part, yes.
For the most part. Let's go to first-time caller Mark Kona on the Big Island in Hawaii. Hey, Mark, go ahead.
Aloha, gentlemen. George, thank you for taking my call.
You're
first
welcome.
and long over here. V, it's a pleasure. I've got a real quick stream of thought here. You mentioned previously that since the U.S. went into receivership in 1933, that basically the nation's wealth, our assets, such as, let's say, real property, have all been submitted as collateral for our debt. So that those of us out here that even own their land and have the mortgage really don't own it. In the precious metals world, we have our mantra, you don't own it unless you hold it in your hand, and it would appear as though there's a little tweak to that when it comes to the real estate scenario. It's my understanding that the Federal Reserve issues Federal Reserve notes to the citizens of the country, and it's not a right that we have to use them, but it's a privilege. And because of that privilege and that Federal Reserve note being their product, there's somewhat of a little bit of a debt that is assigned to everything that we purchase using those notes, which shows ownership by the Federal Reserve. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that, and any idea, ballpark range, how much it would cost minimum portfolio to leave the country? I'll listen to you off the air.
Okay, go ahead, V.
Fantastic, Mark. It's a great question here, and he nailed it. And that's exactly what it is. The land, if you look at every mortgage application, okay, the very bottom of it, it says that the Federal Reserve, in very tiny letters, is basically the lender of last resort. Okay, they practically own all the mortgages. And thanks to systems like MERS, okay, they have bought and sold mortgages on the back end to the point where most of these banks don't even know who the heck has the title anymore, all right? We've all heard the stories on the news where individuals who have bought their homes outright and paid cash for them are now being foreclosed upon by the banks, and they have to go through a whole court process because there's such a disillusionment as to who has the deeds and the ownership of the house. Okay, so that is the issue, folks. You know, people say, well, you know, I paid off my mortgage. All right, my mortgage is paid off. I own the land. I'm good to go. You don't own anything in this country. You want to know who owns your house? Don't pay your property tax.
Then you'll know.
You'll find out real quick. All right? They might even SWAT team you these days, just for the fun of it. Okay? So that's number one. So because of the simple fact that we have a Federal Reserve note, and that's currency, folks, and people need to understand real quick the difference between currency and money. Those are two very different things, all right? And that Federal Reserve currency that's been given to us as a privilege to use has debt attached to it, because a currency is somebody else's, it's legal tender, it's somebody else's debt obligation. Real money for the last 6,000 years has been gold and silver, okay? And that's the recognizable form worldwide for real store of wealth. But in terms of a market question about leaving the country in any type of portfolio, go to my website, roguemoney.net. Folks, this website is a brand new website. It was actually launched yesterday.
And you don't do the www on it, or you get a squirrel. Did you know that, V?
I didn't know that. I got to contact my webmaster.
So don't do the www. Just do roguemoney.net, and you'll get right in.
Got it. I'll let my webmaster know that immediately. But yeah, go to roguemoney.net. Don't put the www. All right. There's a consultation tab on there. Click it. Number one. Number two, I want to let people know this. And Steve Quayle and Doug Hagman could vouch for this. I am one of the most ripped off guys on the web. And what I mean by that is this. I've had my articles ripped off verbatim by Forbes, by Wall Street Journal, okay? And, folks, my site is a brand-new site. It's a subscription-based site. For pretty much 9 cents a day, you're going to get cutting-edge financial information. There's a consultation up there as well, which, is a separate charge. But you will have access to the preeminent website for financial news and information. I have top-tier guys that are going to be writing for me as well. So, Mark, contact me through that site, or you can contact me at gorillaeconomist@gmail.com, and we can discuss that further.
All right, very good. Let's take another quick call before the break. Tucson, Arizona. Michael, take it away.
Okay, that's me. Hey.
Hi, Michael.
Hi, George. Hi, V.
Hey, Mike.
I got to do this really quick. I just wanted to tell V also that I have filled out my UCC1 form, my UCC1 lien. I own my commercial liability. I have not done my UCC3. Two quick questions. The end game here. It looks like they're trying to make us all slaves. If they're going to stagflation, if they're going to reduce the value of our buying power, is that the end game? And other than precious metals, is there obviously not real estate? Where would we put our wealth? Second question: if we all want to run for office, would you recommend that? And if so, should we do it under the Truth Party, say? And go ahead, I'll listen off the air. Thank you.
Got less than a minute, V. Go for it.
In terms of owning real estate in this country, it's very tricky based upon what federal land is owned by the feds, what's owned by the state and local municipalities, Indian reservations, things of that sort. Okay, if you're able to get what's called a root title to the land, and that's one of the ways, and you got to make sure that that land or that house that you bought is not on the MERS system. Your mortgage is not done on MERS whatsoever. When we do go into collapse, okay, and if you have a foreign creditor that comes knocking on the door, what I've been told from my sources is that they will accept gold or silver as exchange for payment for the land that's been sold to them as collateral on the back end. Okay, so that's the good news. In terms of running for local office, I recommend anybody getting involved in a political sense, go ahead and do so. In terms of political parties, I definitely abstain from the mainstream false left-right paradigm, and I hope those are...
All right, EV, we're going to come back and wrap things up with final calls on Coast to Coast AL. What makes a psychopath? That's one of the things we'll talk about on our next Coast to Coast program, so make sure you're part of it. And when we come back with V, we're going to take final phone calls here on Coast to Coast AL. Final segment with V. V, those people who are listening to us tonight, what would you like them to bring with them, bring away from this program, listening to you?
One of the things that I really want people to understand is this, okay? The bread and circus that we've enjoyed for so long in this country is done. It's over. We are moving into a new paradigm, and what that exactly means, I don't know what those details are. But I will tell you that we are moving into a time of great struggle and turmoil as well as chaos. It's going to be very rough for the people here in the United States of America. Okay? Some of us will have to think about becoming more globally minded in the sense of moving out of here. Okay? Others of us would have to think of preserving their wealth. And for that, I can help in every aspect of those things that I've mentioned, okay? Roguemoney.net would be the site to go to for that information. Now, that being said, you'd have to think about preserving your wealth because, look, your currency is being inflated to oblivion, and that's going to happen. So that's the biggest thing that I want people to understand, that this is not a cycle. This is not business as usual. This is not, let's kick the can down the road. There's no more road left for the can to be kicked down anymore. And that's what I want people to grasp, is to understand what is at stake here. And what is at stake is your future. Your hard-earned wealth is at great risk and great jeopardy.
And you got to be smart about it.
Absolutely.
Back to the phones we go. Bronx, New York. Joe, good morning, Joseph. Go ahead.
Hi, how are you, George?
Good, Joe.
I'd like to ask your guest if he thinks that the banks will eventually control the world. And also I heard him mention natural gas deposits in the Middle East. There was something I heard about natural gas deposits being either on the coast or off the coast of Israel. Can he elaborate a little bit on that?
Sure.
Absolutely. Let's start with that natural gas off the coast of Israel. In fact, the discovery of that, which is about almost a decade ago, of 16 trillion cubic feet of natural gas right off of Israel, Lebanon, and here's the key word, Syria. And that was what painted Lebanon and Syria as on the map of the globalist banksters and their war for resource and control. So that's absolutely correct. That is one of the big things right now. You see, we talk about the petrodollar, and the survival of the petrodollar is very much also tied into the control of compressed as well as liquid natural gas that's within that region as well.
You know, this Afghanistan, let's talk about that and that pipeline that they wanted to get. It is being worked on, isn't it, right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Ever since we've procured control of Afghanistan, we began to work on the Caspian pipeline. Okay, the thing with again, this is why Iran is a target. Okay, folks, it's downright ridiculous the charade these guys are playing. All right, they have to mow down Iran, and they're trying to mow down Syria, and this is all about pipelines. It's all about natural gas and getting it into the hot European markets. Yes, that pipeline is being constructed. It's in its phases, and you got to understand the globalist banksters. These guys do not want a stable Middle East. Okay, it is through chaos that they are able to really siphon and control much of the resources of a particular nation, and they need that. They can't have a strong, stable republic type government set up in the Middle East. It's complete anathema to the banksters. Hence, I mean, you look at Libya. What is the first thing we did when we toppled Libya besides procuring their oil fields and securing it? Okay, what we've done is we've set up the Libyan central bank. In fact, that was one of the first things that was drafted by Al-Qaeda. I mean, think about this. Al-Qaeda's first agenda was set up a central bank. I mean, how crazy is this?
Next up, Anthony, Glendale, Arizona. Go ahead, Anthony.
Yes, hi. How are you, George?
Good, Anthony. Thank you.
Hey, good afternoon. Good evening. I'm a little bit nervous. You got me nervous with this MERS system for the real estate?
Oh, yeah.
I wanted to find out a little bit more information on that without taking too much time. If you could just kind of brief me on that, because I heard all kind of horror stories about notes being missing and all that good stuff, and I want to try to buy a house, and yet I hear all these stories, and I don't know. You know what I'm saying? So I just want to try to get as much knowledge as possible.
All right. What can you tell us here, V?
Well, the thing about MERS, which is the Mortgage Electronic Recognition System, the thing with MERS, and especially with the selling of collateralized debt obligations, mortgage-backed securities on the global market, that has caused the ownership, the deed of the house, to be shifted from various investment firms, various individuals worldwide and over. It's caused a great deal of fraud and a great deal of just absolute bewilderment as to where these deeds are. In fact, there was a gentleman, I just don't remember the guy's name. I think he has a New York Times best-selling book. I'm not exactly sure on this, but it's called Clouded Titles. It's a great book to pick up. He actually details the MERS system, goes very in depth into it, as well as ways you can avoid it. Another thing with MERS is this. They are passing a law, and again, every instance where a person's title was brought before a court of law, the judges usually have those foreclosure
David Krieger, by the way. That's
yes, David Krieger. There it is. That's the guy's name. David Krieger, Clouded Titles. Great book. Pick it up. The courts have thrown out most of these MERS cases because they just can't. These banks just show up to court and they have no title. They have no claim to the house. So now the banksters have decided to pass laws with their bought and paid for Congress that they don't even need to show up with the title. They just say, oh, the house is in the MERS system. Here's the printout for MERS. Therefore, we own the house. So when you're trying to buy a house, as I told the last gentleman, you want to look for land that's not on federal land. You want to look for something that's not in the MERS system. If you want to buy a house, you want to make sure, ask your bank, do you guys use MERS? And if they do, tell them you don't want it. And if they can't offer you an alternative, you're going to walk away from it. That's what you got to do, and you got to shop around for banks or credit unions that, and this is the smaller banks will allow you to do this. The bigger ones, forget about it. But the local credit unions that would allow you to purchase a mortgage that's bypassing the MERS system. That's step number one. Step number two is you got to preserve your wealth. Okay, if you don't have gold and silver. Now, a lot of people ask me, well, V, where do I get gold and silver from? Look, I get all my clients to get it directly from Renaissance Precious Metals. That's Steve Quayle's business. Okay, call Steve up. He's been very fast with delivery. Gets it to you the next day. Okay, get gold and silver while you still can. All right, because should the time come where you get a knock on the door and you have a foreign national saying, "Get out of the house, I want it," you can say, "Hey, you know what? Let me buy back my home from you." And oftentimes, like I said before, foreigners understand the value of precious metals. You would be able to preserve and protect and buy back what you have, okay, once this federal fiat system is done away with. Hope that answers your question.
And do you think they would actually come and confiscate the gold?
No. I'm going to give you a little play-by-play. There is far too much gold and silver in the hands of private individuals, okay, even though not everybody's buying it, but, there's a limited supply of gold and silver on the market. And that limited supply is in so many hands, and a lot of it, number one, is hard to track who has it. Number two, it just takes too much of a hassle, too much resource just to have the manpower to go out and individually try to confiscate your gold and silver, number one. Number two, banksters have kind of learned, and as the Indian central bank is learning right now, when you try to enact laws limiting the purchase of gold or precious metals, all you do is create a burgeoning black market, okay, which becomes even more lucrative and more detrimental to your economy, okay? Now, in terms of confiscation, I will tell you that many of the depositories, okay, such as those in the Northeast and in the West Coast, have been targeted for confiscation, just like your bank safe deposit boxes are not safe at all. Okay, just like your bank accounts are not safe at all. Folks, if you're holding more money in the bank than you need to pay your bills and run your expenses with, you're crazy.
Would you keep a little cash hidden away?
I always recommend keeping at least $10,000 to $15,000 to even $20,000 in cash in a vault or safe in your house, okay? Reason for that is it comes in handy should you have a banking disruption occur and you can make it to an ATM and you can make it out to get money out of the bank. It allows you to get through. Okay, and that money will be used up very quickly in a hyperinflationary environment. But yeah, always good to have some currency on you. I recommend, if you have a little bit of dollars. I also recommend foreign currencies. Certain foreign currencies I like: the Swiss franc, 40% backed by gold; the Norwegian krone, backed by the commodity or the mineral wealth of and the oil wealth of Norway. The Aussie dollar is very good. New Zealand dollar is also very strong right now. So I have some foreign currencies that I recommend as well.
Let's go next to Simi Valley, California, West. Ben's with us. Good morning, Ben.
Hey, how are you doing?
Good, Ben. Thank you.
I would like to ask your guest, you spoke about McFadden earlier, which is a hero, and he also said that gold is not needed to back their internal currency. But I wanted to know if you were familiar with the Federal Reserve Act. I know you touched on that, 1913, Section 16, where it says the Federal Reserve notes are to be issued of the. Let me read it to you real quick.
All right.
It says Federal Reserve notes to be issued at the discretion of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System for the purpose of making advances to Federal Reserve banks through the Federal Reserve agents is hereinafter set forth, and for no other purpose is hereby authorized. Did it say me and you are authorized to have them?
Nope. Doesn't sound that way.
Well, it's a privilege. having the federal notes and using it as legal tender is a privilege that's been given to us by the Federal Reserve.
Sure is.
So we don't have total ownership of those notes.
But we do use them.
Yes.
And how long can we use them? Until something
Not
happens?
for long.
You think they're going to change things or what? Cashless?
Oh, the push, and I've worked on some of the systems and I'm very familiar with the upcoming high-speed data networks that they've laid all over the world, as well as the complete new digital NFC payment systems that are up and running. They've introduced this on smartphones, where you just take your smartphone, you whiz it by your little Starbucks register, and all of a sudden a receipt prints out and you're on your way.
Amazing.
Okay? So that's already set up. So the system's already there. So we are going digital. You see, the paper, the actual physical paper of currencies, that paper supply is being destroyed.
Of course.
That's why, there's instances of massive bank and ATM outages that are occurring all throughout the country, where individuals go to an ATM, they can't get cash out, and they go into the bank account, they say, our systems are down, we can't give you the $40 or $50 that you need right now, just use your debit card. And the question a lot of customers have, well, I could use my debit card, but I can't get the paper money out. Well, it's correct, because most banks are insolvent. Okay, they don't have money. If I were to tell you how many big name banks are showing up to the Federal Reserve window to borrow as little as $10,000 to operate for the week, you'll be bewildered. Okay, so the paper supply is being destroyed. We are transitioning to a complete digital currency.
If there was a run on a bank, they could not supply you with the cash.
Absolutely, the banks have no cash. I mean,
Minimal.
Go to your bank one day and say, "Hey, let me get out $3,000 or $5,000." See what hoops you got to jump through to get that.
Can we say that even if we don't have it in our account? Would that work?
That would be great.
Let's go to Jenny in Cincinnati. Hello, Jenny. Go ahead.
Hi. I was wondering, you're talking about foreign currencies. Is the impending revaluation of the Iraqi dinar going to have any effect on our economy or the economy of the world?
Here's the thing, okay? Look, I'm going to tell you from an inside source, and I get these emails on Iraqi dinars, and I don't mean to offend anybody, please. I'm a New Yorker. I'm going to give it to you straight. No feelings. I don't mean to hurt anybody's feelings, okay? The whole Iraqi dinar thing is a scam, okay? It is a poorly constructed scam, in the hopes that one day this country is going to be stable, and moves are being made to reevaluate the dinar.
That could be
not going to happen.
50 years from now.
Say that again?
That could be 50 years from now.
It could be 100 years from now. So there are individuals who have spent a considerable amount of money in order to buy these dinars. My best advice to you, and this is from a banking insider, I know how the system works. Get rid of your dinars. Get a real currency or get a real asset.
You can buy 5 million dinars for $5,000.
Yep. I'd rather take 5,000 and buy a couple ounces of gold or 500 ounces of or a couple hundred ounces of silver.
So you're saying it's a bad investment?
It's horrible. Iraq will never be stable. It was. You got to understand, Iraq is a multi-ethnic country with various different religious groups, all vying for power. Number one,
it's out of control.
All vying for control, and number two, you have this entity called the United States Anglo-American Banking Cartel that's in there that has disrupted things. So you keep the people infighting and in perpetual chaos while you rob them of your resources. Why on earth would the United States want a stable Iraq? Why? Number one. Number two, Iraq is not Dubai, okay? So it's never going to be Dubai.
Never.
Right? You look at prosperous Middle Eastern countries, those are the ones with very strong Emirates or, royal.
Well, and tight-fisted leaders, and so much for democracy.
Exactly.
We support all those dictatorships.
Right. So much for Iraq.
So be it. So, V, we're out of time. Thank you. Get your website out one more time.
The website is roguemoney.net. It is the one-stop shop. I mean, you have everything from ETFs, commodities, bonds. Everything is on there. You can join. It's an initial payment of $10, and then it's $2.99 a month. 9 cents a day, folks. You're gonna. I mean, there are sites that charge $26 to $50 a month for not even close to the information that we put out at roguemoney.net. If you need consultation, you can contact me at guerrillaeconomist@gmail.com or hit the consultation tab over at roguemoney.net. If you need precious metals, you can contact Steve at Renaissance Metals. And also you can check out revelationnow.net, which is one of our sisters.
All right. What a future we have. Thank you, V.